You are listening to the Keep the Weight Off podcast with Dr. Angela, episode number 64.
Welcome to the Keep the Weight Off podcast, where we bust all the dieting myths and discover not just how to lose weight, but more importantly, how to keep it off. We go way beyond the food, and we use science and psychology to give you strategies that work. And now your host, Dr. Angela Zechmann.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the podcast this week. Hey Marchelle, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Hey everybody.
Yay. Well, guess what? April is Emotional Mastery Month in our Empowered Weight Loss membership. So we've been working all month at understanding our emotions, learning what they mean, and how to manage them without buffering with food or alcohol or anything else for that matter. And it's been really great, and we're all learning so much. So this is an exciting part of Empowered Weight Loss. I always enjoy teaching emotional mastery. But just a quick definition for those of you who might not have heard the term buffering before. So buffering is when we put something between us and our negative emotions. So let's say we're experiencing some sort of negative emotion, but instead of going ahead and feeling it, we distract ourselves with something external. And humans use a lot of different things to buffer, from eating toxic food products or drinking toxic beverages, to smoking, to using drugs, gambling, vegging with Netflix, getting on social media, watching porn, overworking, over-exercising. There are a lot of things that we do to try not to feel our negative emotions. And that's what I mean by buffering. Does that make sense?
Yes, it just made me think of something I wanted to add really quick here.
Okay.
So one of my close family members, we were talking a little while back, and they said, life is just like a series of distractions, to keep you from, the Monday, 9 to 5 grind. And it kind of hit me hard in a way that, this person that was their take on life is just, trying to distract yourself from all the negativity, the negative emotions. And so this kind of made me think of that there's probably a lot of people that think that way. It's just, you just need to keep on trying to distract yourself from, any of the negativity, that life brings. So I'm glad we're talking about this.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the first things that we want to understand in order to develop emotional mastery. And that is that we have to stop buffering so that we can actually feel our emotions. And the reason is because our emotions have a lot of information for us about what's going on in our souls. And when we cover them up by buffering, we miss a lot of the messages. And then we can't live authentic lives. So let's say someone says something to you and you feel anger, but you were taught as a child that anger is not okay. What are you going to do with that anger? You decide to go eat or drink something so you don't have to feel the anger. And then you lose the authentic part of yourself that was feeling that emotion. You just lose it. So a lot of us end up having no idea who we are or what we're about because we've been so busy just stuffing our emotions for so long.
Oh, that is so me. You're talking about my life.
Well, it happens to all of us. Now, I want to say at the outset that this is not our fault. None of this is our fault. Because remember, our primitive brains are all about finding pleasure and avoiding pain. And so avoiding the pain of a negative emotion is hardwired into us at very basic primitive levels. So just remember that we naturally want to avoid pain at all costs. And, that's normal and natural, but it's just that it doesn't really serve us all that well if we want to be evolved human beings. And particularly if we want to lose weight and keep it off, right? Is that making sense?
Right. So I have a quick question. Okay, so could you tell me this? So Your primitive brain, okay, so when you're born, does the primitive brain and the executive brain already exist? You just decide to tap into one or the other, or do you have to create the executive brain because you're born with the primitive brain? So like, I'm not sure. I don't understand.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a really good question. So we are born with a primitive brain that knows everything to do to keep us surviving. We're also born with a human cognitive brain that is developed. And so it takes our growing up years in order to fully develop our cognitive brain. And I think I heard it happens at different rates for boys and girls and men and women. And my recollection is that it's like by age 27. At least for girls. I'm not sure what it is for boys. I think it might be around the same age for boys too, that we are fully developed to the point where we're able to rely on our prefrontal cortex. But all through that time, and this is why adolescence can be so hard, because adolescents have opportunities for to get into all kinds of trouble, and they don't have the cognitive capacity yet to override their primitive brain that's looking for pleasure and pain avoidance and comfort in the moment and all of that. So that's a really good question. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
So as we're thinking about this, I teach emotional mastery by first teaching about the emotional scale. So I have developed a diagram of the emotional scale that we'll make available to you in the show notes, so that if you want to download the scale, you just go to journeybeyondweightloss.com/blog/64, which is the episode number, and you can download the emotional scale and print it. Now, I recommend printing it in color. I know it's easier to print it and cheaper to print it in black and white, but if you print it in color, the colors are important. And then go get it laminated. So then you can have a copy that you can stick on your fridge for reference. It's a really handy tool when you're wanting to go buffer. Okay.
Yes, we have it hanging on our refrigerator.
Yeah. We have it all over our office too. So
yes, we do.
Yeah. So I'm going to just sort of, a picture's worth 1,000 words, but I'm going to try to do less than 1,000 words to explain what's in this picture. I want you to envision a set of steps, and you're starting at the bottom and going up step by step by step. And each of these steps is an emotional state. So I want you to imagine that the worst feeling emotions are the lowest steps on the bottom, and the best feeling emotions are the highest steps on the top. Now, the worst feeling emotions are the emotions of powerlessness, victimization, and despair. And guilt, shame, and unworthiness are really down here as well. These emotions feel absolutely terrible. They're directed inwards at ourselves. And basically, we're beating ourselves up is what's going on.
Guilt is the one that gets me.
Yeah. Yeah. Shame.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Shame, guilt though, man. That's hard for me.
The next general set of emotions are emotions like jealousy or rage or anger or revenge or blame. Now, notice that these emotions are higher on the scale because what we're doing is we're taking some of our power back and we're directing our negative emotion outwards at other people. So believe it or not, as bad as rage feels, it feels better than self-loathing, right? Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then you move up a little bit more. The next set of emotions are the emotions of stress and anxiety. And many of us are living here pretty consistently, especially
most Americans are living in that state.
Yeah. I agree, especially with the pandemic and now with the war in Ukraine. We're all pretty anxious. And there's been a lot in the news lately about how this is affecting us as a society. And people are much more willing to, have physical altercations with each other. And, people are behaving very badly on airline flights. And there's just a lot of stress and anxiety right
we
now.
moved up on the emotional scale as like a whole society. Because I think everybody was sort of like in despair for a while. Like, oh my gosh, is this ever going to end? Oh my gosh, we're so overwhelmed. And then now we're like getting mad.
Yeah, maybe.
So we're moving up.
I hadn't thought of it like that. Maybe you're right.
Yeah.
All right. Next, the next set of emotions are the sort of blah feeling emotions like boredom. And, there's not a lot of energy behind boredom. And actually, this is where it's pretty easy to shift into a more positive feeling of contentment or peace. So peace is a positive emotion that doesn't have a lot of energy behind it. So think about there's a line between boredom and peace, or boredom and contentment. That is the delineation between the negative end of the spectrum and the positive end of the spectrum. And if you're feeling bored, it's not too hard to move yourself into a state of satisfaction or peace.
Really? Because I feel like there's an elevator between boredom and peace. like a 7-story elevator. Because for me, boredom is more of like an action or let me think. How would I explain it? Boredom for me is I feel more restless, when I'm bored, and then that a lot of times leads to like some sort of action, like some sort of a bad behavior, like trying to change that, and it usually doesn't lead to peace. For me, it usually led to like distraction, like we were talking earlier, like some kind of a distraction, because you get bored and I want to distract myself from the boredom. So that's when I start eating snacks at work.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be eating, right?
Right.
So moving.
So that's not you moving.
It's a little hard.
Well, you're not actually moving from boredom to peace if you're using snacks.
No, I'm just buffering. See, that's
right. Exactly. Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. I feel like there's an elevator, that you have to take to get to peace, because it's not like, oh, I feel bored, I'm going to do peace now.
Right.
Like, I feel bored, I'm going to eat some snacks while I'm working because I'm bored. And and that's where I get stuck. Yeah.
So moving from boredom to peace takes a shift in your thinking, because thoughts are what create emotion. So this is what we teach in the Empowered Weight Loss membership, because figuring out what thoughts you're thinking that are creating boredom there's a little bit of a technique there, and figuring out what thoughts to think to help create contentment or peace. So you can actually shift at that stage, though. You can make that shift. It'd be very hard to go from thoughts of self-loathing to thoughts of peace or contentment. I always say you can't make quantum leaps on the emotional scale, but you can make small incremental leaps. Okay?
Yeah, definitely. I think, we have to also take into consideration, people's, like if people are suffering with, like what ADHD or, other medical issues, which for me, I feel like I have some undiagnosed ADHD going on. And that's why like I sit at boredom a lot, because my mind goes a lot faster, and I like to hurry up and get things done. Right. And then I'm sort of sitting there waiting. And this is, this happens because we spend a lot of time at work. So I'm just using work as like an example, because my job is definitely not boring. I'm sure everybody knows that. It's just that my mind works in a way that I create an environment where I get bored a lot, because I hurry things along and then I'm sort of waiting for the next thing to happen. And in that waiting period, when I get bored is when I'm like, oh, what's in the fridge? Or like, what's that? I'm bored. I want a snack. I just ate, but ate dinner, but right now I'm bored. So, I want a snack. So boredom is, for me personally, is a huge emotion for me. I guess, I don't know. I never thought it was an emotion before. I thought it was sort of a state of mind. Yeah. But, so that's a challenge for me as well.
Yeah. You're not alone. I guarantee you. Right. You're not alone. All right. So let's go with a positive emotional side now. So let's say we're at contentment. What happens if you move up from contentment? You get optimism and hope. Okay, these emotions feel really good, actually. And when they gather momentum, then you actually begin to have like a sense of knowing and a sense of passion and excitement, right? And then the highest end of the emotional scale is this sense of pure love and joy and the sense of being at one with all that is. That's the high end of the emotional scale. So knowing the range of emotions is imperative if you want to end buffering with food or toxic beverages and keep your weight off without returning to some other sort of buffer like gambling or shopping, which we sometimes see people do if they're no longer eating, but they haven't learned how to manage their emotional life. Is that making sense?
I've seen that. Yes, I've seen that more than I could even say with our patients, where we sort of transfer. That's another thing. We sort of transfer, one type of buffering for another that seems more like acceptable. And I myself have done that. I mean, like many times, and I didn't even know I was doing it.
Right.
That's how our primitive brain tricks us so easily, is that it wants that dopamine hit, and it wants to feel safe, and it wants to feel content. And so, but not the kind of content that we're talking about, the emotions. It's just content like, oh, I just satisfied an urge kind of content, right?
Yeah.
And which is it's self-serving and doesn't last very long. I mean, like, getting a dopamine hit is great for a second, but it just doesn't last very long. And then you're on to the next thing. Right.
Exactly.
So, So then I've like said, okay, well, I can't do that. Can't have snacks because I'm not supposed to be doing that. So then I'll find myself shopping and buying stuff that I'm like, I walk out of Target and I'm like, what the heck just happened? Like, what? Why did I do that? I think I even called you when I've done that. And I'm like, what? Yeah. Why did I do all that? And you said, oh, it's buffering. And I was like, wait a minute, what? I didn't even catch it.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
Yes, you have to be careful because your brain is just going to keep trying to trick you on these different levels when you're trying to move up the emotional scale, because mine certainly has. So just something to watch out for.
Yeah. Yep. Over shopping, over Netflixing, over Facebooking, all ways of buffering. Yeah. So how do you use the emotional scale? So let's say that as a podcast listener, you went and you downloaded the emotional scale and you printed it up in color and you laminated it and you've got it on your fridge. Now what? The first thing that I want to say is that there are a lot of nuances. And if you really want to understand this in depth, join our Empowered Weight Loss membership so that you can, because I can't teach it to you all in a podcast. But I'll give you some of the basics right now. If you find yourself wanting to buffer, the first thing to do is to ask yourself, what emotion are you feeling? Now, here's something really interesting. Brené Brown, who's the famous researcher on shame, you may have heard of her, you may not have heard of her, but she has an HBO special out right now called Atlas of the Heart, which is actually really good if you want to develop some emotional awareness. She did a survey of 7,000 people, and I am remembering what she said in that video, in her videos of Atlas of the Heart. So it might not have been exactly 7,000; it might have been a few more or a few less, but let's say 7,000 people. And she wanted to ascertain their level of emotional awareness. What she discovered is that people really had no idea what they were feeling beyond either happiness, sadness, or anger. So she jokes around. She calls it the sad, glad, and mad triad.
I love it.
I know. So I'm either feeling glad, I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling mad. And I really don't know any other, I don't have any more emotional literacy than that. So most people just don't have any sort of awareness beyond the sad, glad, and mad triad. So figuring out exactly what you're feeling can sometimes be a bit of a challenge. So if you're not sure, just sit down with a piece of paper and a pen and start writing. So get all of your thoughts and feelings out on paper. It's a little bit like emptying out your closet so that you can examine them. And then you might find something interesting. So as an example, one time I was feeling really, really uncomfortable. And I had no idea what I was feeling, no idea why I was feeling it. And I just knew I wanted to eat. And so it was, I couldn't really describe the feeling at all. So I started writing, and I discovered that the feeling that I was feeling was jealousy. Jealousy. So,
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
who would have guessed that? I was embarrassed and I was ashamed that I was jealous because I was taught from a young age that jealousy is a very bad thing to be feeling. So I just noticed that, and I acknowledged that all feelings are exactly what they are and they're not something to be ashamed of. Okay. And that's actually a really huge thing to understand. I think many of us are taught that it's not okay to feel what we're feeling. Like anger's not okay, and jealousy's not okay, and sadness and depression is not okay. We seem to be okay with worry for whatever reason. Worry seems to be a badge of honor for some people, but just notice all of that. Just notice that. Okay. Oftentimes, this is all it takes to feel better, is just naming that emotion, because it brings such a sense of relief to have a name for what you're feeling that it will keep you out of the food or alcohol. But if that's not enough, all you have to do is move yourself up the scale a little bit. So you don't have to feel great to keep yourself out of the food. You just have to feel a little bit better and feel a little bit of relief. Okay, so for example, if you're feeling shame, really common, by the way, if you struggle with this disease of obesity, very common to feel shame, try moving up the scale to revenge. I always say, use revenge fantasies to your advantage if you're feeling shame. So if I'm feeling ashamed, or even if I'm feeling sad, let's say I've just diagnosed yet another case of diabetes, that makes me feel really sad. But it almost instantly turns to anger and revenge. And I like to imagine food industry executives tied up in burning buildings.
You're going after the food industry. I already knew.
I'm going after the food industry. That's a very satisfying revenge fantasy. It helps me feel so much better, right?
Oh, if you guys knew Angela, you would understand. This is it's her mission. It's her mission to take the food industry down.
Well, not all the food industry, just those people that are telling us that we should be eating crap, you know?
Right.
So
right. The processed food industry.
Yeah, there we go. The toxic food industry.
That's right. There you go.
Now, let's say you're feeling stressed out. Blame and revenge are headed in the wrong direction. They're headed down the emotional scale. And you always want to be moving up the emotional scale, never down. So if you're feeling stress, it's actually possible to move to peace fairly easily just by taking a few.
How do you move to peace very easily when you're stressed? Like what does that look like? Could you explain that to me?
Yeah. You take a few deep breaths. That's the first thing. Just take a few deep breaths. And what I like to do is to marvel at the fact that my body is actually able to take the breaths that I'm taking, which is filled with oxygen. And somehow it takes that oxygen and moves it throughout my body and nourishes it. That is actually a really remarkable thing. When you think about how your body works and what's all going on, just by taking a breath, it brings a sense of peace. It brings a sense of well-being, because you're like, wow, this is amazing that my body can actually do this. It brings a sense of gratitude.
Okay.
And it just helps.
But if we're talking, so I'm going to give you a scenario, like a situation. Okay. So, life is stressful. I got called, there's a person out at work and, I'm covering their shift, I'm speaking for, maybe a lot of the nurses out there.
Yeah.
Because, they've been overworked and, we're all stressed out. COVID is, just stressed everybody out. And everything goes wrong on a Monday, okay? And you're just reaching your breaking point. And for me, when that happens, the first thing I want to do is go get a martini, because I know it's going to be, and it's like it's instant,
Yeah.
It's my coping skill, okay? It's what I know. It's familiar to me, okay?
Yeah.
So trying to change that behavior, and to move up the emotional scale. I mean, peace seems like it's a million miles away at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying, so you stop, right? And you take some deep breaths. If you know,
Mm-hmm.
if you can step aside for a few minutes, you know,
Mm-hmm.
take some deep breaths.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I'm talking about making good eating choices here.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as taking, you know, the deep breaths,
Mm-hmm.
then you're in the moment, and
Mm-hmm.
basically it sort of calms you down, right? Because like I said, my first urge is to go eat a donut or, you know, drink a beer, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I want to make myself feel better.
Yeah.
Okay. And because when you're stressed, you're not thinking very clearly. Okay. Because, you know, stress just puts your mind in a place where, you can't really make good decisions under
Mm-hmm.
stress. I
Yeah.
mean, some people can. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's people that can make good decisions under stress, but like for me and maybe a lot of other people, that are struggling with, you know, like overeating,
Mm-hmm.
stress, you know, brings, bad decisions about, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to get a freaking pizza because I don't feel like cooking tonight. I can't handle all of it. I don't feel like
Mm-hmm.
cleaning up the mess. You know, I do
Mm-hmm.
want my family to eat healthy, but do I want to clean up the mess because I'm the only one that's cleaning up, you know? I'm like, forget about it. We're going to get a pizza, so I don't have to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, feeling guilty the whole time because I know better, but
Mm-hmm.
I made that decision because I just didn't want to deal with another thing on my
Mm-hmm.
plate, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in that case, so we're going to take a few deep breaths, and then what?
Mm-hmm. So you're taking a few deep breaths, and a lot of people don't even acknowledge that they're feeling stressed. So a lot of times it's like they're having all of this churning inside of them, and they're reacting to it without naming it, and just saying, "Whoa, wow, I'm really stressed out right now," can be huge. Just naming it. Oh my gosh,
okay.
I'm feeling really, really stressed, and acknowledging that. Okay. And even talking with someone else about it, saying, you know, wow, I feel really, really stressed right now. I didn't even realize just how stressed out I am. And reaching out, you know, the steps of self-compassion can come in very, very handy here. We've talked about those before, where you're like, first of all, just acknowledge, here's what I'm feeling.
All right.
And recognizing that lots of people feel stressed, and that you're not the only one that feels stressed. And it's a part of the human condition to feel that. And reaching out to someone else instead of, we have this tendency to want to isolate ourselves when we're feeling icky, you know,
Yeah,
and
we do. Definitely.
reaching out for connection with another human being.
Okay.
And then you mentioned, well, if you do decide to go with a pizza, then, you know, you're beating yourself up about that. Kindness.
Yeah, I wouldn't feel peaceful afterwards. I would feel guilty, and I would feel bad that I made, you know, after. I mean, I would feel good in the moment that I didn't have to clean up, you know, the freaking mess after my family again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then afterwards, I always, you know, feel guilty because I made, you know, a bad decision because I knew that I shouldn't have done that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel peace after that. So that's kind of, that's kind of what I was getting at when you were talking about, that's my personal take on, you know, moving up the scale. And like I said, peace seems like a million miles away when I'm under a lot of stress, and that could just, you know, a lot of home stress, you know, and people right now. I mean, the last 2 years have been going through so much added stress, you know, with the kids going to school at home, and mom's trying to work from home, and you know, do homeschooling, and there's just and so what I've tended to see is a lot of our patients that kind of had their shit together for a long time sort of fell off during, you know, those times of stress, like the quarantine, and a lot more drinking going on, a lot more, you know, overeating. And so, you know, this is an important thing to talk about is so, you know, is in that moment when that comes, like, what do we do to make a right decision and stay on track and be able to, you know, to make the right decision in those states of mind, or, you know,
in those states of mind.
I mean, and sometimes not even a state of mind or a moment. It's like stress lasts for a whole year. You know, and it doesn't let up.
Yeah.
So,
well, have you ever noticed that there are times where, it feels like stress, but it doesn't feel that bad, and then there are times where, it feels like stress, and I really just want to I just want to go like drink myself into oblivion.
Right. Heck yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So what's the difference there? The difference there is your capacity for coping. And so, and if you're at the state where it feels like stress and you want out, that's called overwhelm. That's overwhelm.
Okay.
All right. And because you're past just being a little bit stressed and you are completely overwhelmed.
Oh, okay.
And Brene Brown gives a brilliant description of all of this in that HBO series I was talking about. When you're overwhelmed, you need to just stop everything and do nothing. You just do nothing. Okay. So if you're at that point, that's when you just do nothing. And it could be you need more rest. Could be you need to just go to bed. But you don't want to be trying to expect any sort of good decisions out of yourself when you're in overwhelm. There's just no way. There's no possible way. If you're feeling just sort of stressed in general, then you can use the steps of self-compassion that I talked about. You can, first of all, acknowledge what you're feeling and name it. And remind yourself that feeling this is part of the human condition, that everybody feels it every now and then, that it's normal and natural, and that you're a human being too, and that your negative emotions are okay. And then reach out for connection with someone and be super, super kind to yourself, no matter what happens. Kindness to yourself will always go much, much farther than any sort of self-criticism. Of course, our brains are naturally tuned to want to criticize ourselves because that's how we survived, but it's not helpful anymore. So you want to be very, very compassionate with yourself. So
it just makes me realize like how, I guess I don't even know how to label certain emotions. Like I've always been the kind of person that didn't like to deal with emotions. I don't know if anybody else out there is like that.
Oh yeah, everybody is. According to Brene Brown, it's sad, glad, and mad, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's so I'll admit, I'm doing some therapy right now.
Yeah.
And she, my therapist will ask me, so what are you feeling? And I blank out. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Like I really don't. Like I feel pressured to tell her something and she's looking at me and I'm looking at her and I don't know what I'm feeling because I don't know how to label. Like that's a thing.
Yeah.
Like being able to describe the emotions you're in in the moment is I can't come up with the words. Like I said, happy or, glad or sad, it's like dig a little deeper and I got to bust out my emotional scale.
Yeah.
So I have some words to even say, because it's hard to describe these emotions sometimes. And we just tend to try to brush, in our society, it's not okay. Like you want to just, do your 9-to-5 job and not cause any waves, and so it's, we're starting to, as a society, I think, forget that, we have all these other words to describe our emotions besides, glad, sad, and mad. So
yeah. So so I'm glad we're bringing awareness to all of this because I think this is huge when it comes to losing weight and keeping it off. Becoming emotionally attuned to yourself and knowing what it is that you're feeling so that you know what to do instead of buffering is huge. I mean, this is why I always say your journey to lasting weight loss is a journey of personal evolution, because you really want to do this right. You have to do more than just go on a freaking diet. You just have to do more.
It's not about what you're eating.
It's not.
It's
about what you're feeling. It's about what you're thinking. There's so much more to it. So yeah. Yeah. So good. I'm glad we had this discussion. So this has been great. So this has just been like a brief introduction to the emotional scale. And remember, we do have a whole program available for you if you really want to get some more knowledge and understanding about all of this. Just join us in the Empowered Weight Loss membership. Just go to JourneyBeyondWeightLoss.com and click the Done with Dieting Bootcamp tab. And that's how you can get started with us. And we look forward to working with those of you who are really ready for this. Many people aren't ready.
I hope we're triggering some curiosity, because that's how I started. Is I became curious. I was like,
yeah. Curiosities are really good,
right?
Curiosities are really good emotion too. So yeah,
right.
Yeah.
If you're curious, just go and check it out. Check out the website.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening today, and we will see you with another podcast next week. Take care. Bye.
Hey, if you really want to lose weight and keep it off for good, your next step is to sign up for Dr. Angela's free weight loss course, where you're going to learn everything you need to get started on your weight loss journey the right way. Just head over to journeybeyondweightloss.com/free course to sign up. Also, it would be awesome if you could take a few moments and write a review on iTunes. Thanks, and we'll see you in Journey Beyond Weight Loss.